My name is Heinrich Schmidt, Chief Sonar Operator aboard the Imperial German Navy submarine U-28. As I write this, my hands are still trembling. It has been a full 9 years since it happened, yet every night when I close my eyes, that sound returns to my ears, the kind that travels through seawater, something that does not belong to this era at all. I have to start with that night. December 21st, 1917. We were on a combat patrol off the west coast of Ireland. U-28 was a Type U-23 ocean-going submarine, with a submerged displacement of 870 tons, equipped with 4 torpedo tubes and an 88mm deck gun. Our captain was Captain Carl Weber, a hard man who had already sunk 3 British merchant ships off the coast of Flanders. The sea conditions that day were terrible. A force 7 northwesterly wind, waves nearing 5 meters. Whenever we ran on the surface, the boat pitched violently, and the lookout on the bridge was drenched by seawater every few minutes. Our patrol sector was a critical node along the North Atlantic shipping lanes. Allied merchant convoys departed from Canada and the United States, loaded with food, ammunition, and steel, crossing these waters bound for Britain. Our job was to find them and send them to the bottom. Since the war began in 1914, this cat-and-mouse game had gone on for over 3 years, and both sides were deep in blood. At the time, we were cruising on the surface at 12 knots. The roar of the diesel engines made the hull hum, and the forward compartment was thick with the mingled smell of diesel, sweat, and spoiled food. It's a smell you never forget once you've known it. It seeps into your skin, into every fiber of your wool uniform, and no washing ever quite removes it. I sat at the sonar station in the forward compartment, a bulky carbon microphone receiver in front of me, headphones clamped over my ears, listening to the ocean pounding against the hull. To be honest, the first 6 hours of that day were mind-numbingly dull. Winter days in the North Atlantic are short. By 4 in the afternoon, it was already pitch black. There was nothing on the surface but waves, not even a seabird in sight. The rest of the crew went about their routines. The chief engineer checked the diesel fuel filters, the 2 lads in the torpedo room serviced tubes 2 and 3, the navigator hunched over the chart table recalculating our position again and again. Everyone knew this rhythm of routine patrol. It was like a slow pulse, something that made you feel both safe and numb. But what I want to talk about is the fog of war. Those of us in uniform, whether infantry crouched in trenches or men like us sealed inside an iron coffin drifting at sea, talk about it. Commanders use the term to explain intelligence failures, to justify shells falling on friendly positions, to account for fleets that appear clearly on radar yet vanish when you arrive. But what we enlisted men speak of in private is a different kind of fog. Not the kind that obscures enemy lines, but something deeper, more unsettling. It's that moment, at a certain place, at a certain time, when you suddenly feel the boundaries of the world you know begin to blur. The lines you thought were unbreakable, between what is real and what is not, start peeling away like paper soaked through with seawater. Do you know how deep that ocean is? The waters we were sailing over were about 2,800 meters deep. 2,800 meters. The best periscope on our boat could see no more than 30 meters below the surface. Beyond that, nothing but endless darkness. And what's in that darkness? At naval school, I studied acoustic physics, how to distinguish a merchant ship's propeller from a warship's steam turbine by its echo. But no textbook ever told me that, 800 meters down in the Atlantic, something might reach out from the fog of time itself, answering your presence in a frequency you have never heard before. 9:17 p.m. I remember the time exactly because I had just signed the watch log. 21:17, sea conditions worsening. No abnormal sonar contacts. I set down my pen, put my headphones back on, and adjusted the sensitivity dial on the carbon microphone. The system was simple. Hydrophones mounted on either side of the hull picked up underwater vibrations, converted them into electrical signals, and fed them into the headphones. Unlike later active sonar, we emitted no pulses. We only listened, like a rabbit hidden in tall grass, ears raised to every movement around us. In the headphones was the standard background noise of the North Atlantic, the crash of waves, the low-frequency drift of distant currents, and the constant rumble of our own diesel engines transmitted through the hull into the sea. Every sonar operator knew these sounds by heart. They formed a kind of acoustic carpet, and your ears lay upon it, waiting for any thread that did not belong. At 9:18 I heard it. Not a propeller. That was the first thing that set me on edge. I had served 11 months aboard U-28 and listened to no fewer than 100 propellers. British destroyers' high-speed turbines produced a sharp, wasp-like whine, while merchant ships' reciprocating steam engines made a slow, rhythmic metallic knocking, around 60 to 80 revolutions per minute. Each propeller had its own acoustic signature, like a fingerprint. I could identify ship type, approximate speed, even estimate distance by ear alone. But what I heard at 9:18 was not a propeller. It was a very low-frequency, rhythmic pulse, around 18 to 20 Hz, right at the lower limit of human hearing. In fact, I didn't so much hear it as feel it. A pressure suddenly filled the headphones, as if some enormous hand deep beneath the water was squeezing the ocean at a slow, deliberate rhythm. Each pulse came about every 2.5 seconds, perfectly regular, far more stable than any machine I had ever known. Diesel engines fluctuate with combustion strokes, steam engines with piston irregularities, electric motors with current oscillations, but this pulse had none of that. It was pure, crystalline, like the heartbeat of some living thing. I turned the sensitivity to maximum. The background noise surged into a hiss, the waves dissolving into static, but the pulse became even clearer. Every 2.5 seconds, deep, powerful, penetrating. I rotated the hydrophone direction control. The signal was about 30% stronger on the left than the right. Bearing, forward port side, below the horizontal plane, at a steep angle. "Captain," I called out, pulling one side of the headphones off and raising my voice toward the control room. Captain Weber was speaking with the navigator at the chart table when he heard my voice. He turned around. Weber was a 42-year-old man from Hamburg, with deep-set eyes and high cheekbones. When he spoke, his lips barely moved. He walked over and bent down toward my sonar station. "Contact?" His voice was low, carrying the same trait shared by all submarine captains, speaking in a subdued tone even on the surface. "Port side bearing, passive acoustic contact," I said, handing him the headphones. "Not a propeller, Captain. Some kind of low-frequency pulse, very stable, around 20 Hz. Depth unknown, but signal attenuation is minimal, which suggests it may be propagating from extreme distance. Possibly from the deep ocean." Weber put on the headphones and listened with his eyes closed for about 30 seconds. I saw his brows slowly tighten, a deep vertical line forming between his eyes. After half a minute he removed the headset and looked at me with something I had never seen on that hardened face before. It wasn't fear, it was confusion. The confusion of a man who had fought at sea for 3 years suddenly hearing something his experience could not explain. "Get the chief engineer," he said. Chief Engineer Klaus Mayer was a mechanical expert who had spent 15 years in naval shipyards. He could identify a diesel engine fault with his eyes closed. He put on the headphones, and after just 10 seconds he removed them. "It's not a mechanical fault," he said firmly. "I know the vibration signatures of every system on this boat. This frequency doesn't match anything in our machinery, and the source is external. Bearing is stable. Could it be some new British underwater listening device?" someone asked. Mayer shook his head. "A 20 Hz signal in seawater requires enormous energy. To transmit something like this from the deep ocean at this strength, the source would need energy on the scale of a battleship firing its main guns. The British wouldn't deploy something that large underwater. It would serve no military purpose." The control room fell silent for a few seconds. The diesel engines suddenly felt unbearably loud. "Dive," Weber ordered. "Depth 30 meters. Silent running. I want to hear what this really is." The order changed the entire atmosphere aboard the submarine. The diesel engines were shut down, air intakes closed, exhaust sealed, and the electric motors engaged. That transition, from the roar of diesel to the low hum of electric propulsion, was familiar to every submariner. It meant you were disappearing from the surface world. From that moment on, you were hiding in the dark. U-28's bow tilted downward, and the depth gauge needle began to move. 10 meters. 15, 20. The hull creaked faintly under pressure, a sound old hands recognized like breathing. 25, 30 meters. The submarine leveled off and held depth. The electric motors ran at minimal speed, reducing our speed to 2 knots. The entire boat entered silent mode. No one was allowed to speak, walk, or open any hatch. Even breathing seemed to unconsciously quiet itself. In that absolute silence, the submarine felt like a giant stethoscope pressed against the ocean itself. I put the headphones back on. At 30 meters, surface noise was greatly reduced. The low-frequency pulse became clearer than ever, 1 beat every 2.5 seconds, deep and steady. But this time, there was something else beneath it. A kind of something I struggle to describe, a sliding sound. Extremely distant, extremely faint, like a massive sheet of silk dragging across rough stone. It had no mechanical regularity. It wasn't repetitive, but continuous, slowly shifting. Its frequency range was wide, extending from mid-range down below human hearing. The hydrophone only captured fragments of it. I closed my eyes, trying to assemble an image from the sound in my mind, but I couldn't. Nothing in any acoustic reference I had ever studied matched it. Then the sliding stopped. The silence that followed was abrupt. The low-frequency pulse continued, every 2-5 seconds, perfectly stable, but the sliding sound was gone. Completely. Cleanly. As if whatever had been moving had suddenly frozen in place. I reported the change to Weber. He stood in the center of the control room, one hand on the periscope crank, the other resting on the leather holster at his waist. It was an unconscious gesture. I had seen him do the same when approaching British convoy routes. His body knew there was a threat, even if his mind was still trying to understand it. Then the sound returned. This time it was different. No longer the low pulse, no longer the slow slide. It was something I had heard before, but never at this scale. Water being violently displaced by something enormous. Like dropping a boulder into the sea and hearing the dull thud of water swallowing it. Except this was magnified beyond anything natural. Not a boulder, a mountain. A mountain moving upward through the deep ocean. And it was accelerating. The change in bearing defied everything I knew. Only seconds earlier it had been forward port side, at a steep downward angle, far below us. Within roughly 40 seconds, the bearing shifted rapidly, the elevation angle rising from deep negative toward horizontal. Whatever it was ascending vertically from the abyss, directly toward our depth. I looked up at Weber, opened my mouth to speak, and the entire submarine lurched. Not a collision, not metal striking metal, a pressure. U-28 was suddenly gripped from below by an invisible force, tilting about 12 degrees to port. Loose objects slid across the deck. Compasses and rulers from the chart table clattered to the floor. From the engine room came a metallic groan, the sound of structural stress in the keel. Every submariner knew what that meant. You were being pushed beyond your design limits. The tilt lasted about 4 seconds, then abruptly stopped. The boat leveled again, as if the grip had released it. The silence inside the hull was total, except for the electric motor's low hum, now painfully loud. Then came the smell. I had spent hundreds of hours in North Atlantic submarines. I knew exactly what a boat should smell like underwater. Diesel residue, trace hydrogen from batteries, sweat, canned food, rust in compressed air lines. That was the olfactory map of the underwater world. But now, all of it was overwritten. A thick, suffocating odor seeped through every seam of the hull. Salt and decay. Like standing on a tidal flat at low tide, but multiplied tenfold. Like opening a sealed underground chamber that had been closed for decades. Or perhaps the closest description was this: it smelled ancient. Not merely old. Geological. As if seawater compressed for 100 million years deep within the earth had suddenly surfaced. Everyone smelled it. I saw Weber's nostrils flare, and then his face changed. A man who had stood through the Battle of Jutland without flinching, who had faced British battlecruisers at point-blank range, now turned ashen gray. The smell lasted about 30 seconds, then vanished as abruptly as it had arrived. In my headphones, the low-frequency pulse was still there, every 2-5 seconds. But it was weakening, rapidly. Its bearing was dropping. Whatever it was leaving. 15 seconds later, the signal disappeared completely into the background noise of the North Atlantic, swallowed as if it had never existed. No one in the control room spoke. The electric motors continued running. The depth gauge held steady at 30 meters. Everything had returned to normal, as if the entire last minute had been a collective hallucination among 44 men. Weber spoke first. His voice was half a tone lower than usual. Surface. Return to surface navigation. U-28 surface 4 minutes later. The cold wind of the North Atlantic hit us head-on, but no one complained. Everyone who climbed onto the bridge was gasping for air, as if trying to force that ancient smell out of their lungs. I stood on the wing of the bridge, watching the Black Sea churn under the moonlight, my mind replaying over and over that sliding sound in the headphones. That was not mechanical, not anything human-made. It was organic, the sound of muscle and skin moving through water, only amplified to an impossible scale. Weber stood in the center of the bridge, both hands gripping the railing, staring at the sea for a long time. Then he went down to the control room, took out the navigation log, and I watched him open it. He picked up a pen and wrote a few lines under the entry for December 21st. When he was done, he closed the log and locked it inside the captain's iron cabinet. 3 days later, we sank a British merchant ship traveling from Halifax to Liverpool in the same waters. A torpedo struck midship, and the vessel went under in 12 minutes. We surfaced, fired a few rounds from the deck gun toward the lifeboats, then submerged again and left. The war went on. You had to keep killing, keep doing your duty. The North Atlantic did not give you time to process things you could not understand. In November 1918, the war ended. U-28 was seized by the British. I and the 23 surviving crew members were sent to a POW camp and were not released until the spring of 1919. After returning to Hamburg, I tried to find out what Captain Weber had written in the log. I located Otto Braun, the former navigation officer of U-28, who after the war had gone to Bremen and worked as a pilot for a shipping company. We met in a tavern near the harbor. After finishing 2 full bottles of gin, he finally agreed to talk about that night. "The captain didn't write anything," Braun said, staring at the residue at the bottom of his glass. "Not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't know how. How am I supposed to write that in a logbook? 2118, unknown underwater object contact, unknown nature, caused abnormal hull displacement and unexplained odor? Submit that to Naval Command so they can decide we've all gone insane from submarine sickness? Did you ever encounter it again?" I asked. Braun was silent for a long time. Outside, the lights of Bremen harbor burned brightly, and a freighter was entering port, its horn cutting low through the night. "March 1918, he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We were on reconnaissance north of the Shetland Islands. That night we heard it again. The same low-frequency pulse, the same sliding sound. But this time it didn't approach. It followed us from a distance, about 20 nautical miles, stayed with us for nearly 4 hours. Everyone aboard acted like nothing was happening, but every pair of eyes kept drifting toward the sonar station." He paused, then drank the last of his glass in one swallow. "Heinrich, do you know what scared me the most? Not the sound itself, it was the stability of it. The pulse interval, 2.5 seconds, never changed. Whether it was at 800 meters depth or a few hundred meters below us, that rhythm never changed. Do you understand what that means? That's the heartbeat of a living organism. But no known circulatory system could generate that level of acoustic pressure, unless..." He never finished the sentence. In the autumn of 1926, 9 years after it happened, I was working at a shipping maintenance company in Hamburg harbor. My job was to service radio equipment and echo sounders on merchant vessels. It was dull work, but at least I was no longer inside a steel submarine. I had married and had a daughter, trying to let the memories of those war years recede like a tide going out. But every December 21st, I would lose sleep. Everything from that night would replay automatically. The diesel engines, the sudden pulse in the headphones, the tilt of the hull, and that smell seeping through the seams of the submarine from geological depths. My wife said that sometimes I spoke in my sleep, words she couldn't understand, my lips moving as if I were talking underwater. In October 1926, I received a letter from England. The envelope had no sender's name, only a London post office box. Inside were 2 photographs and a folded sheet of paper. The handwriting was neat, in English, and it took me some time to fully understand it. The letter was short. "Mr. Schmidt, certain experiences during your service aboard U-28 may be relevant to our research. The enclosed photographs were taken earlier this year off the coast of the Isle of Skye, Scotland. The photographer was the captain of a trawler who retrieved these objects in his net from a depth of approximately 200 meters. If you are willing, please reply to the address on the envelope. You are not alone." I picked up the photographs. The first showed the deck of a fishing vessel, with a trawl net laid out across it. Tangled in the net was a dark brown mass. The image was black and white, but the texture was unmistakably clear, some kind of biological skin fragment, covered in fine scale-like structures. The arrangement of each scale did not match any fish species I had ever seen. The edges of the fragment were torn, as if violently ripped from a much larger body. The second photograph was a close-up. The details were sharper. These were not ordinary scales. Each one had a geometric, polygonal structure, with tiny serrated edges, arranged with unnatural precision, as if engineered. Worse still, between them were remnants of soft tissue. Even in the blurred image, It was clear that the tissue had a dark, sponge-like consistency, unlike any marine muscle fiber I knew. I turned the photograph over. On the back, written in pencil, was a single line. Fragment currently under radiocarbon testing. Preliminary result. C14 dating method ineffective on sample. Organic preservation state anomalous. Estimated age far beyond upper limit of radiocarbon scale. The upper limit of radiocarbon dating is roughly 50,000 years. Beyond that, carbon-14 levels decay to the point of being undetectable. What does far beyond the limit mean? 100,000 years? A million? 100 million? I stared at the photographs for a long time, until the harbor outside fell into the dusk of October. I placed the letter in the bottom drawer, alongside my iron cross medal. I never replied. I didn't know what I would even say. Should I tell a stranger in London that on the night of December 21st, 1917, at 21:18, using a carbon microphone aboard a German submarine, I heard a heartbeat from the depths of the Atlantic every 2.5 seconds? That 44 men on board all smelled something rising from geological time itself? That a 1,000-ton submarine was squeezed like a toy from below, and then gently released? They would call it after effects of war. They would call it sensory distortion from prolonged pressure exposure. Submarine anxiety. Claustrophobia. Any diagnosis that could be placed into a file and left to gather dust in an archive. But I know what I heard. Starting in October 1926, I began quietly collecting information. I knew many sailors in Hamburg Harbor, merchant crews, fishermen, long-range research vessels. I bought them drinks, and once alcohol softened their tongues, I would casually ask the question, in all your years at sea, have you ever heard a sound whose origin you couldn't explain? Most shook their heads, but 3 of them paused mid-motion, their hands freezing around their glasses the moment I asked. A gunner on a Norwegian whaling ship told me that in the spring of 1919, they were hunting whales near South Georgia. The sonar operator reported a pod of blue whales singing underwater. But when he put on the headphones himself, he realized that beneath the whale song there was something else, a deeper frequency. Not whales, he said. Even blue whales don't go below 10 Hz. This was lower than that. Just one single tone, like a string stretched to infinity. He tracked it for 2 hours until the signal vanished beneath an Antarctic underwater mountain range. A Dutch first officer who sailed Pacific routes said that in 1922 their cargo ship passed near the Java Trench, where the depth exceeded 7,000 meters. That night the sea was so calm it looked like glass, but no one on board could sleep because the hull kept vibrating. It was extremely subtle, impossible to notice unless you were lying against the steel structure. The frequency was about 20-something pulses per minute, roughly every 2.5 seconds. He calculated it against his own pulse. 2.5 seconds. It matched his heartbeat rhythm exactly. The last was an old German fisherman working in the North Sea. His story was the shortest, and the one that chilled me the most. He said that in the summer of 1908, before the war even began, he was fishing herring near Dogger Bank in a small sailing boat. One night, fog rolled in with visibility under 20 meters. As he hauled in his nets and prepared to return, the water beside the port side of his boat suddenly rose. Not like a wave. Something massive and smooth emerged beneath the surface, a curved ridge pressing up alongside the hull. It did not break the surface, but stayed about 2 meters below it, moving parallel with the boat for nearly a minute. He said its color was not black or gray, but an indescribable deep blue, like ice from the abyss. Then it sank without a splash, vanishing into the fog as if it had never been there. How big was it? I asked. The old fisherman looked at me, then extended a calloused hand and pointed toward the tavern we were sitting in. From the front door to the back wall was about 25 meters. Longer than this room, he said. Much longer. In mid-April 1926, a newspaper report circulating in Hamburg made me sit on a bench at the docks for an entire afternoon. A German paleontological expedition had discovered a complete ichthyosaur fossil in the Poseidonia Shale formation of Württemberg. Such finds were not unusual. The Poseidonia Shale had yielded thousands of ichthyosaur fossils over the past century. But this one was different. Its preservation was described as an unprecedented three-dimensional structure. Bone, muscle outlines, even skin impressions had been preserved in a way that felt almost unnatural. The researchers proposed that the creature had died and rapidly sunk into an oxygen-deprived Jurassic deep sea, where ultrafine sediment encapsulated it at a molecular level, protecting it from bacteria and decay. It had remained sealed for 183 million years before being revealed in the 20th century. 183 million years. I kept rereading the number. The article included a reconstructed illustration, a streamlined body, long jaws filled with teeth, or flippers, a vertical tail fin. The spine extended from head to tail. Estimated length, 15 to 20 meters. It was the apex predator of the Jurassic oceans, ruling the seas while dinosaurs ruled the land. A small caption beneath the image read, "Soft tissue partially preserved." Researchers observed a structure resembling a heart in the rib region. Estimated size, 1.5 times that of an adult blue whale heart. I folded the newspaper and put it in my coat pocket. That night I did not sleep. One image kept repeating in my mind, a Jurassic ocean 183 million years ago, a 20-meter ichthyosaur drifting through the deep. Its heartbeat, once every 2.5 seconds, traveling through seawater, and then, 183 million years later, being picked up by the most primitive carbon microphone aboard a German submarine. If an oxygen-free deep-sea environment could preserve a creature's body for 183 million years, then was it possible? This thought made me sit up in bed in the dark. Was it also possible that something else could survive there? Not a corpse. Something alive. Still alive. For 183 million years. In a part of the ocean humanity had never truly reached, existing in a metabolic state so slow it was beyond comprehension. Still there. A heartbeat every 2.5 seconds. Never stopping. I thought of Captain Weber's navigation log aboard U-28. That log was later seized by the British and taken to the Admiralty along with all captured German submarine records. I don't know which archive shelf it is gathering dust on now, but I know what Weber wrote on that page. 11 years after the war, I found Weber in the port of Bremen. He no longer resembled the hardened submarine captain he once was. He worked as the captain of a river barge, moving up and down the Weser River each day, sand, coal, anything that needed transporting. His hands were still the same hands that had once controlled a U-boat in the North Atlantic, but now they held a barge's wheel. We sat on a bench by the river. The Weser was a dull brownish gray, completely unlike the deep blue-black of the North Atlantic. He smoked his pipe in silence for a long time. Then he removed it and said, staring across at the shipyard on the opposite bank, "I've never told anyone this, but I think you've been thinking the same thing." I didn't respond. He continued, "After the war, I met a British submariner in a POW camp. He served on HMS E9. In 1915, during operations in the Baltic Sea, they encountered something similar. Their captain also recorded it in the logbook, only for it to be sealed away by command. That British sailor told me their navy had a classification for these incidents, a file designation for unexplained underwater acoustic contacts. They called it deep-sea chimes. Deep-sea chimes? Because the sound came every 2.5 seconds, as stable as a metronome. Between 1914 and 1918, the Royal Navy recorded this signal on 7 submarines across different waters: North Atlantic, North Sea, Mediterranean. 7 separate cases. And every time, the signature was identical, a low-frequency pulse with a 2.5-second period, always originating from depths below 2,000 meters. He put the pipe back in his mouth and took a long drag. Think about it, Schmidt. 7 submarines in 3 different seas over 4 years, all detecting the same acoustic signature. British naval acoustics experts calculated that to produce a low-frequency pulse detectable at those depths, the energy output would have to equal the shaft horsepower of a dreadnought battleship at full speed. No known marine organism can generate that level of pressure. Not a blue whale, not a sperm whale, not a giant squid, not anything alive in the oceans. He exhaled smoke into the damp air of the Weser River, where it slowly dispersed. But what if that thing's heart is the size of a steam locomotive? We fell silent at the same time. In late April 1926, I made a decision. I gathered all the materials I had collected over the years. Correspondence with old comrades from U-28, the letter and photographs sent from London, newspaper reports about the ichthyosaur fossil from the Posidonia Shale, testimonies from the Norwegian whaler, the Dutch first officer, and the old North Sea fishermen, and placed them all into a metal box. On the lid, I welded a cross-shaped seal with a blowtorch, then sank it 12 nautical miles off the coast of Hamburg, on a sandy seabed at a depth of 40 meters. I did not have the courage to make it public. A former German Navy sonar operator, arriving with scattered testimonies and blurred photographs, trying to convince the world that a Jurassic apex predator might still be roaming the depths of the Atlantic. He would be sent to an asylum, just like all those sailors who claimed to have seen things that should not exist. They would be labeled hallucinations, alcoholism, war trauma, and then forgotten. But I also did not want to carry it into my grave, so I returned it to the place it came from. 2 years later, in the autumn of 1928, a British research vessel arrived in Hamburg Harbor. It was called Challenger 2, belonging to the British Institute of Oceanographic Research, conducting a deep-sea acoustic survey of the Atlantic. I watched it from a distance on the dock, its white hull, the unfamiliar precision instruments on deck. A British naval officer stood on the bridge with a clipboard, speaking with the scientists. I turned and walked back to the workshop. A radio in the workshop was broadcasting a report. German and British paleontologists had jointly published a paper on the ichthyosaur fossil discovered in the Posidonia Shale in 1926. The study confirmed that its soft tissue preservation was unprecedented in paleontological history. Under the microscope, researchers had even observed cellular-level structural remnants. The paper stated that the fossil proved deep-sea anoxic environments could act as near-perfect time capsules, capable of freezing moments of life and carrying them across millions of years into the future. The announcer finished in a calm tone and moved on to the next story. I sat at my workbench, holding a damaged echo sounder transducer in my hands. It was wrapped in seaweed, carrying the mixed scent of seawater and rust. I brought it closer to my nose and closed my eyes. Rust. Salt. The faint sweetness of decaying seaweed. Not that other smell. I opened my eyes and placed the transducer back on the table. Outside, the sky over Hamburg Harbor was overcast. A November wind blew in from the North Sea, carrying the familiar brine of the ocean. In the distance, Challenger 2 was weighing anchor, its bow slowly turning toward the outbound channel, westward, toward the Atlantic, toward that blue wilderness covering 70% of the planet, of which humanity had explored less than 5%. I do not know what its hydrophones will hear in that wilderness. Perhaps only whale song. Perhaps the low rumble of underwater volcanoes. Perhaps the metallic echo of submarine propellers. Or perhaps, at sufficient depth, below 800 meters in the eternal darkness of the North Atlantic, in that unchanged anoxic abyss that has remained since the Jurassic, it will detect it again. A signal, every 5 seconds, stable, like the pulse of geological time itself. And then some acoustic technician aboard the ship will furrow his brow, press the headphones tighter against his ears, increase the gain, confirm it is not equipment failure, and write a line in the logbook. *unknown underwater acoustic contact. Low frequency pulse. Source depth exceeds 500 meters. Characteristics do not correspond to any known natural or artificial origin. His superior will read it, then someone higher. And then it will be filed away, labeled, placed into a metal cabinet that will never be opened. Just like us in 1917. Just like the British in 1915. Just like all those sailors who stayed at sea long enough to touch the edge of the world. The North Atlantic will continue to churn its gray waves. At 30 meters below the surface, light begins to fade. At 200 meters, it becomes perpetual night. At 1,000, pressure is enough to deform steel. At 800 meters, the Jurassic seabed lies in silence, buried under 183 million years of sediment. And something may still be moving above it, a massive tail fin pushing through the water, a sensory system attuned to vibrations from the surface. Eyes adapted to eternal darkness, turned upward, listening. It has always been listening, every 5 seconds, without stopping.